I was the hitchhiker. It's awkward to be the hitchhiker, to be on this side of a scary folktale. Let's not talk about how I got here. Not really important. What matters is that I've never looked more disheveled. And I've never felt more awkward. Just a weird-looking dork sticking my thumb out on an empty road, sandwiched between two forests pitch black. It's midnight, I think. I didn't have my watch on me. Or my phone. Or anything else that tells the time. My internal clock ain't great either. But let's say it's between 10:49 p.m. and 2 a.m. I think. Probably. Car goes past. Doesn't even think of stopping. I don't blame him. Looked like a couple that were just coming back from a fun camping trip. They don't need my nonsense right now. I mean, I wouldn't stop for me. Would just be silly, really. I'll hold out hope. Maybe a van filled to capacity, save for one seat in the back, would stop for me. They could take a chance. After all, if I tried anything funny, I'd be vastly outnumbered. 20 minutes pass. No van. Actually, no cars at all. I guess people don't really use this road. Or it's late. And hitchhiking on a Wednesday night, or a Thursday morning, isn't really a wise move. Ooh, look, a car. They're slowing to stop. No, it doesn't look like they can take me, but they look apologetic. That's sweet. They're sort of mumbling sorry and shrugging. That's fine. I'm just glad you looked at me, really. I'm pacing. I wish I had my cigarettes. I hate being in one place for too long. I hate being alone with my brain. I ruminate. I hear sounds coming from the forest and they creep me out. I think about worst-case scenarios all the time. You know how your brain can drum up something much scarier than anything real life can throw at you? Yeah. I just need to try to be present. Second thought, maybe I should just stay in my head. It's safer up here. The more mindful I get right now, the more it's clear I'm in the middle of the fucking road with no hope of getting home. There's a feeling of tension in my chest. It's tight. It aches. I breathe into it. It'll dissipate. I've lived with anxiety long enough. I have my tools. Yes, I did in fact notice the car in front of me on the road slowing to a stop. And no, I'm not gonna get my hopes up. Shit. The driver looks professional. Like she actually has her life in order. Hon, don't do this. Statistically, this isn't a good move. The odds are not in your favor. She looks like she just straightened her hair. Like she's coming from some sort of tech conference. Business casual. You could put her in a brochure. Fucking hell, she looks my age. Don't do this. I could be a maniac. I can wait for the van. You look like you've had a rough night, she says. I keep my distance from her. Hey, look, thank you for the kind gesture, but I'm actually kind of waiting for a car with more people in it. So that it's less weird for everyone, I respond. She laughs. Get in. I'll be okay. If I'm being honest, I'm praying for another car to come by. Nope. I get in. Lady, I'm gonna give you a lecture about safety once you drop me off. It's not wise to pick up a scruffy hitchhiker like me in the middle of the night. Whereabouts you heading? She asks. Honestly, 2 hours in the direction you're already driving. I'm in Morgantown. Anywhere in the city is fine. Cool. I can take you a good chunk of the way there, I think. Depends on how much I like you, she says, laughing. I'm kidding. I'm just grateful for the ride. Thank you. We sit in silence for a bit. I was hoping she'd put on the radio or something. Usually people are more talkative. I don't want to start ruminating again. I wonder what she's thinking. Does she regret picking me up? Is this weird? Is she scared for her safety? She shouldn't be, but I get it. This is weird, right? So, I do have to ask. It's Thursday morning at 1 a.m. What are you doing in the middle of the road? She asks. 1 a.m., nailed it. My internal clock is better than I thought. And look, lady, I know you just want to have a conversation, but I really don't want to answer this question. Retreat with my friends. We do it every year. It's a bit of a ritual, I say. She looked confused. Right. And does the retreat end with you standing in the middle of the road? Looking, the way you do right now? No offense. None taken. And, no. I left early. On not so great terms, I respond. She snickers. She looks at me. Kind of warm. That's it, she says. That's it, I respond. She shakes her head. Awkward silence. I'm starting to go back into my head. Please turn on the radio or something. You know, if you talked more, it'd be easier to trust you. I mean, I did pick you up in the middle of the night, she says. I laugh. You're free to drop me off wherever you want. I feel weird about this too. It's kind of like when you're accidentally walking behind someone at night. And you feel weird. But you two are going the same way. And yet you stuck out your thumb. And got in the car, she says. Good point. I mean, it was a good point. It's good to self-reflect sometimes, right? I can be a hypocrite, sure. She laughs again. Okay, I'll tell you something about me. But then, you have to tell me more about you, she says. Damn it. She's cute. I picked you up because I've had benders before. In a past life. She motions to her clothes. I mean, come on, I didn't always look this fancy. I had to sort some shit out in my life. For someone who claims to be as grounded and put together as you are, picking me up was pretty silly. Again, statistically, a pretty stupid choice. And so, you know, I had nights where people would go out of their way to drop me off home. I've literally been in your shoes, you know. Disheveled, barely awake, drunk out of my mind, sticking my thumb out on an empty road. And honestly, it was just as scary getting picked up. But I trusted people. And they took care of me, and brought me home. So in a way, I guess I'm paying it forward. I have full trust that the universe balances things out, she says. She said all of that with a smile. Kind of endearing. Not sure if I trust all of that, but endearing nonetheless. I begrudgingly nod. That's actually kinda wholesome. Now you, she says back. I sigh. This road runs long. It's kinda scary outside. Maybe if she likes me enough she'll take me all the way home. I don't want to be out on the street again. I'll open up. A bit. Alright, so, you ever have that group of friends where you've changed so much as a person that you probably shouldn't be friends with them anymore, but you also feel obliged to show up when they ask you to come out? I ask. She snickers. So you end up going out to that stupid event you know you shouldn't be going to. And you regret it immediately, she says back. Exactly. So I go. Because we're all buddies, right? And we go way back. Except, I don't like the idea of getting trashed at a hostel. And having to give the group my phone, my keys, my wallet, everything. Play that stupid game we all play, I say. Stupid game? I sigh. Alright, but you have to promise to not judge me, I say. She shrugs. Her eyes say you can't stop me. Fine. The game is, basically, that, each of us has to hit the town and find a girl to, bring back to our room. Anyone who doesn't succeed has to sleep outside without any of their belongings, I say, embarrassed. Wow, she says. You and your friends really are chauvinistic morons, aren't you? I make a face. Like I said, I really shouldn't be friends with them anymore. Aw, I'm kidding, she says. You shouldn't let your guard down too quickly. I haven't finished my story yet. I take a beat, then I continue. I came this time, but my terms were clear. I'll hang out, we can drink, and I'm happy to be a wingman to anyone playing that stupid game. But beyond that, I won't be participating. I want to stay at home, kick back, and have a relaxing time. You didn't really think they'd let you not participate, did you? She says. I did. That's why I came. Really? She asks. Really, really? She shakes her head. Moron. You're almost getting too comfortable with me now. I say. Great diversion. But you didn't tell me the whole story, did you? She responds. You know, if I had cigarettes and a light, I'd be happy to go back onto the street. But I don't. Alright, you win. Okay, well, they pulled their bullshit on me. I had a couple of drinks in me, and slowly those assholes grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone, my fucking smokes. Little by little. Pricks. Fuck, I'm getting heated. I'm scaring her, aren't I? By the time I knew the jig was up, they all got together to try to pick me up and throw me outside. You know, force me to play that dumb game with them. Force me to bring a girl back to our room. I'm rambling. Let's try to cool it. You lost your shit, didn't you? I lost my shit, I respond. I freaked out. I'm not usually an angry drunk, but something in me snapped this time. Mark grabbed me by the legs and Francesco had my arms, and they were trying to drag me outside. They were laughing. So I started kicking. And punching. Hard. Once I got my footing, I was just straight up swinging at them. Full force. I feel like I did some damage. Nothing, like, too severe, but, you know. Mark fell to the floor. I kept hitting him. Everyone eventually tore me off of him, but I was still, like, lashing out. Not physically anymore, but verbally. Like, emotional abuse. It was weird. God damn it, I need to save this shit for therapy. Anyways. They just looked at me, mortified. like I was a freak or something. And so, I walked out the front door. And here I am. Took me 15 minutes of walking to realize that I didn't have my phone, keys, wallet, cigarettes. Anything. I wanted to go back inside to ask them for my stuff, but it just felt so weird. Like something was stopping me. Just think it would have been so awkward, you know? To freak out, punch my friends, and then come back and say sorry. I know I'm rambling, by the way. I kind of get stuck in my head sometimes. Sorry. Really wish I had a cigarette right now. I say. Fucking hell, I can't even look at her. She's staring at me like I'm a fucking moron. Keep your eyes on the road, please, ma'am. Dude, you're a fucking moron, she says. I know. What are you gonna do about your stuff? She asks. I don't know. I'll just call them or something. Later. Like, in a few days. To apologize. I'll need to borrow someone's phone to do that, obviously. Or, alternatively, I could bring you back to the hostel tonight. They'll let me come back in if I bring a lady, right? She stops the car. Fuck. I'm sorry. Stupid joke, I say. Awkward silence. She slowly starts driving again. You're not making this easy, she says. I know. The road stretches long. Are your friends smokers too? She asks. Nah, I respond. Just me. You sure about that? Why would they lift your cigarettes if they don't smoke? Just to be dicks, I guess. They're just like that. Fuck. This road is long. Guess I never really paid attention to roads before. That's kind of weird. Why is there an eye on the glove compartment box? Why is it blinking? What is that? I say, pointing. She giggles. Just decoration. You missed that when you got in? Fuck, I'm out of it, I respond. Silence. You think your friends will forgive you? She asks me. I shrug. I mean, who knows? We were already drifting apart anyway. Maybe it's for the best if they don't forgive me. Right. And how does Riley feel about it? She asks. Huh. I talked about Riley. When did I mention him? Riley? I ask. Yeah, she says back. Yeah. I don't really know how he feels about it. Probably the same as the other guys. Hey, when did I talk about Riley? Silence. I never said his name before, I say. She sighs. Yeah, you did. You've been rambling for a while. Repeating yourself over and over again. And then forgetting that you said anything, she says. Fuck. What? I look in front of me. The road stretches long. I look back. This road stretches long. Fuck, how much did I drink? Am I fucked up? And seriously, why is there an eye on the glove compartment? And now you're spiraling. You're in your head, and it's gonna be super quiet and awkward for another few minutes, she says back. Shit. Keep it cool, dude. Clearly, my hitchhiker etiquette needs some work. I'm being unseemly. Sorry, weird night. It's fine. Just take a chill pill, Michael. Breathe in. Relax. It's all good, she says. I never said my name before, I say. You are really forgetting stuff. No, I'm not actually. And I hate to use a very overused term, but it feels like you're gaslighting me right now, I respond. Look, I'm not comfortable with you freaking out at me, she says. Just look out your window, take a breath, and cool it. I'll get you home. Fine. Fucking hell. Back in my head. With my thoughts. Back to looking outside. This road stretches long. This road stretches really long. Am I losing it? Take a deep breath in. I'm okay. It's been quiet for a little bit. I think I can calm down. Yes, that fucking eye is still there, but... You know, I think Mark smoked your cigarettes after you left. To calm down. Alright, she wants to break the tension by theorizing about my friends. Fuck it, I'm here for it. I think he smoked them indoors. A few of them. I think he tossed them, half-smoked and still lit into a large potted plant. I don't think he knew any better. I think they caught fire, she says. Wait. The road isn't narrow anymore. Why does it feel like we're driving on a large open field? What do you say? I don't think your friends knew what to do. They were probably too fucked up. So the whole place was up in flames quickly. Really, really quickly. I think the fire got them. Fuck. Eyes on the road. Stop looking at me while you're driving. Hey. She's smiling at me. Right at me. Deranged. I look away. I look in front of me. We're in the cosmos. But it's not inspiring. It looks like hell. Black holes all around us. Empty space. What the fuck is happening? I don't want to look at her. But I can see her in my peripheral vision. She's still smiling at me. I look over just a little bit. Her smile and teeth are extending beyond her face. Her face is extending beyond her face. Her whole being is taking up more space. She looks animated. Unreal. Pitch black. Unreasonably happy. Her smile is so clear. It doesn't make sense. I feel like I'm prey. This feels like nature. Her eyes are smiling. Warm. She's looking at me harder than anyone's ever looked at me in my life. Fuck. When did I start looking back at her? I don't want to be looked at. Don't look at me. I can't scream. But I'm still alive. Maybe if I keep doing what I'm doing, I can stay alive. If it wasn't the cigarettes, it would have been something else. You shouldn't blame yourself, she says. Did she always sound like this? I turn away from her. My eyes are back on the road. Sorry, on the cosmos. The universe stretches long. They were all going to depart tonight, she says. She's not using her mouth to talk. You wouldn't want to see what's in my mouth, she says. Don't think about this. Just look ahead. Eyes on the universe. Just don't move. Fuck. Wait. Is that my house? Why is my house in the middle of the fucking cosmos? Why is it here? I want to go home. Real home. I can feel your muscles twitching in your arms. And legs. I can smell your intestines. I don't know what to do. I need to stop thinking. It'll pass. One way or another, this'll end. You never eat carrots. Lying is a casual sport for you. You're happier than you pretend to be, she says. She's in front of me. She's splattered on the windshield. I can feel her face on the headrest against the back of my head. She's speaking into me. You're trying not to think. Correct, ma'am. I hope this fucking car crashes. No, you don't. You're hoping it'll all be okay. You're praying it'll all be okay. Stop. Thinking. Zen. Quiet. Breathe in. And breathe out. She's still looking at me. Breathe in. And breathe out. She's stretching into the cosmos. She's everywhere. In and out. It's okay. That's how anxiety is. It'll get worse before it gets better. Breathe in. And out. She's in front of my face. She's even closer when I close my eyes. In. And out. In. And out. Breathe. Were you supposed to be there tonight, too? She asks. Yes. Yes. And yet you weren't, she says. No. No. No, I wasn't. Do you deserve this exit? She asks. I don't know. Not sure. It's coming up soon, she says. I know. I'll ask you again, she says. Fuck. She pierces my hand. And my shoulder. Did you change enough before tonight to deserve this exit? She asks. Please end this. No. No, I didn't. I think I'm a piece of shit. I think I deserve to die, I say back to her. She makes a right on the exit. And we drive. Out of the cosmos. Everything returns to form. Like how it all should be. Trees. Road. Concrete. Gravity. Sky. And I'm home. That's it. I'm home. It's morning. The sun is coming up. Pardon the cliche, but I actually think I hear birds chirping. And she's business casual. Professional. All put together. But I'm bleeding. From my hand and my shoulder. And that eye on the glove compartment box is still there. We're parked. On the street right in front of my house. Okay. I've always been particularly shit at saying goodbye to people who dropped me off. I open the car door. I trudge onto the sidewalk. I look back at her. I close the car door. A slow trickle of blood onto the sidewalk. A little bit on her car. Sorry about that. I should go inside and get myself cleaned up. Fuck. No keys. We're looking at each other. You said some really mean stuff about yourself back there. You shouldn't sell yourself short, you know? She says it with a smile. I believe her. I do a half wave, and before I can think to myself, please God, just fucking drive off, fucking please, she starts driving off. Down the long road. It stretches long. And long. And long. And long. And she's in view still. Smaller and smaller. And then she's gone. It's kind of nice outside. Never realized how pretty this neighborhood is. Maybe I'll stand here for a little while. The end. Next story. There's something really weird happening with my local news channel. I'm one of those dinosaurs that still uses cable. Please spare me your judgment. I like having our town's local news playing in the background. It's occasionally informative, but more often than not, the headlines are light. In such an eventful and politically charged time, it's nice to give my brain a break by switching to a channel where half of the stories are about old animals celebrating their birthdays, traffic in the area, and upcoming fireworks celebrations. Tonight, for the most part, hadn't been much different. The anchors, Michael and Priya, were their usual selves, some banter, some very boring headlines, and then a cut to what's her name on the street doing interviews about I forget and not really important. So, you can probably imagine I had to do a double take when Michael casually dropped the following headline. And, in breaking news, residents of our county have been asked to close their windows, pull back their curtains, and stay indoors. Apparently there's been some sort of chemical leak at a nearby plant, so locals are being asked to take precautions. This request is coming from the municipal government. As this is breaking news, Priya chimed in, "We are currently waiting for information on exactly what took place at the plant, and of course, just how dangerous this all might be." What? Some sort of chemical spill in our area was a pretty damn big deal. It was strange to see the report delivered so nonchalantly from the anchors. I googled my town and the words spill or leak or hazard and nothing came up. I switched stations to more mainstream news channels, CNN, but nothing about this was being covered there either. I figured maybe this wasn't such a big deal, or it was too new for anything outside of local media to report on just yet, and so I went back to scrolling on my laptop while the news continued to play in the background. Half an hour passed, as the anchors cycled through some more generic headlines. Then, a quick reminder, delivered by Michael, and a notice to residents of our local county. Due to a chemical spill that is being reported in the area, residents have been strongly advised to stay indoors, close their windows, and shut their blinds. We have been told that this chemical leak is extremely dangerous, said Priya. Residents are advised to head inside immediately. There is a risk of death if you are exposed to the chemicals for a prolonged period. Giving it a little bit of thought, the lack of news articles about this on the web put a weird feeling in my stomach. Was this story being suppressed? Flipping through other news stations, again, there was no mention of the story. Nothing on the news tickers either. Nada. I had to center myself and give myself a quick reality check. My middle-of-nowhere town wasn't important to anyone other than my local news station or the thousands or so who lived here. Still, in my curiosity, I got up from my comfortable spot on the sofa and peeked through a small sliver between my living room blinds. Nothing out of the ordinary. Cars in their driveways. Most of the lights in the nearby houses were off. It's midnight here. A couple of solitary bedroom lights on. Pretty tame, all in all. Huh. I sat back down. This was probably the most tuned in I had ever been to the news. To my surprise, some really strange banter between Michael and Priya was playing out. I almost wonder if we're safe in here, Michael started. Priya giggled. What, you think this building isn't safe, and that they'd have us deliver news about a leak that we're susceptible to? Michael laughed. Big laughs. He looked at a piece of paper in his hands. I heard, he said, still laughing. I heard it was actually a spill from a train. Not a power plant. Is that so? Laughed Priya. She wiped a tear from her eyes. Oh, I'm sorry guys. We gotta find the levity. Gotta find the levity, Michael echoed. Gotta find the levity in stressful moments like this. Hope you're all staying safe, indoors, curtains closed, windows locked. Remember, this is breaking news. You're hearing this here first, said Priya. Stay inside. Stay safe, tagged Michael, pointing to the camera. We'll give you more details as they come in. They're saying it was from a train now. I peeked outside again. Strange. Most of the lights were off, but some of my neighbors' cars were missing. I saw a family only a few houses down, loading into their car and immediately driving off. Was it safer to leave the town? Didn't they just get exposed to the chemicals? It was hard not to ruminate. Hard not to keep Googling, switching to other news stations, texting my only close friend who lived in the area. No updates. Nothing of substance. Back to the local news. They were covering another story of little importance. My eyes lazily lowered to the news ticker at the bottom of the screen. Between headlines about boring local happenings and Ariana Grande for some reason, I saw the following line: "They are lying run now." Almost as immediately as I saw it, it was scrubbed. Like it had never been there in the first place. Did I imagine that? Before I could ruminate, Priya got up from her desk. And Priya's wrapping for the evening, proclaimed Michael. I'm done for the evening, she affirmed. She walked off set. Michael sat there, smiling at the camera. This continued, uninterrupted, for I shit you not 30 seconds. Then a cut to some sort of CCTV footage angle of a parking lot. It continued for a few seconds, until Priya walked into frame, pressed a button on her keys, and opened the door to her car. Then, another cut. A poor quality, zoom in on the moon. Not a full moon, mind you. It was partially obscured. I think the stage is called waxing gibbous. Waning gibbous, maybe? Doesn't matter. 30 seconds of this. A shaky camera. And then, another cut. The camera was back at the parking lot. Priya and her car were gone. All of the cars in the parking lot were gone, actually. And then, we were back with Michael. What the fuck? Michael went to the next story. Coming up next, this former circus bear is celebrating his 18th birthday, only this time, this birthday comes with a dash of newfound freedom. We'll show you the heartwarming story of Binky, and how he's enjoying his new life in the sun. Michael chuckled as he delivered this headline, before the channel went to commercials. Fresh off another unsuccessful Google search, I parted my blinds and looked outside once again. Nearly all the cars in my vicinity were gone. What the fuck was happening? The noise from the TV transitioned back to the distinctive tones of the local news channel. That must have been like a 10-second commercial break. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is Michael, signing off. Bye-bye now. Stay indoors. Stay safe. Close your windows. Inside now, alright? I backed away from the window and caught the last leg of Michael's broadcast. He had gotten up from his desk and had walked over to the camera. An absurdly big smile on his face. Smiling with his eyes too. joyful. Then, without hesitation, he softly picked up the camera, while giggling, and moved it to the left to expand the frame beyond the anchor desk and the small set that he and Priya were on. Beyond the set, there was nothing. It was a black void. He then turned the camera all the way to the right. Past the anchor desk and the set, again, nothing. Another endless black void. He then recentered the camera back to face the desk, but the void beyond the set was still partially visible. He kept eye contact with the camera for a few more seconds, and then stepped to the side and out of frame. Do I run? What the fuck do I do? What is this? Whispers came from the TV. Michael's voice, quiet this time. You're doing great, he whispered, as if he were beside the camera. You're doing great. Just stay put. Windows closed. All right? I needed to make a break for it. I needed to run. And hey, because I like you, a little tip. He likes it when you stand in front of the bathroom mirror, he paused to giggle to himself. He likes it, just stand still in front of the mirror, won't you? Stay put, he'll come get you soon. You did great. You're doing great. You'll be here with us soon. The channel cut to commercials right after that. A few seconds of stillness, and then I heard a rattling coming from my bathroom down the hallway. I froze in fear, hoping the sound would go away. Instead, it got louder and more aggressive. It was the sound of something cracking, fracturing. As I made a break for it, I heard my bathroom mirror shatter. Immediately, I raced down the stairs to my front door. As I did, I heard the generic commercial on my TV say the following line, the all-new cozy comfort cushions. So cozy, you'll want to stay put, because the best place to be is right where you are. I unlocked my door as the audio from the commercial started warping. Stay put. Be right where you are. Don't leave. As I swung the door open and prepared to run to my car, I felt something grab at the back of my shirt, pulling me back in. It felt both light and like the heaviest thing I'd ever felt. I'm not sure where the willpower in me came from to escape its grasp, but as I writhed and fought with all of my might, I was able to break free from its hold, run to my car and drive off, not taking a single moment to look back at whatever was trying to pull me in. I've been driving for a few hours now. I've texted a few friends, and I'm doing everything in my power to make sense of the inexplicable events that have taken place this evening. The fact that the GPS in my car keeps rerouting to the broadcast studio of my local news network isn't helping. The end. Next story. The Head and the Hand by Christopher Priest. On that morning at Racine House we were taking exercise in the grounds. There had been a frost overnight, and the grass lay white and brittle. The sky was unclouded, and the sun threw long blue shadows. Our breath cast clouds of vapor behind us. There was no sound, no wind, no movement. The park was ours, and we were alone. Our walks in the mornings had a clearly defined route, and as we came to the eastern end of the path at the bottom of the long sloping lawn, I prepared for the turn, pressing down hard on the controlling handles at the back of the carriage. I am a large man, and well-muscled, but the combined weight of the invalid carriage and the master was almost beyond the limit of my strength. That day the master was in a difficult mood. Though before we set out he had clearly stated that I was to will him as far as the disused summer lodge, as I tried to lift him round he waved his head from side to side. "No, Lasken," he said irritably. To the lake today. I want to see the swans. I said to him, "Of course, sir." I swung the carriage back into the direction in which we had been traveling, and continued with our walk. I waited for him to say something to me, for it was unusual that he would give me untempered instructions without qualifying them a few moments later with some more intimate remark. Our relationship was a formal one, but memories of what had once existed between us still affected our behavior and attitudes. Though we were of a similar age and social background, Todd's career had affected us considerably. Never again could there be any kind of equality between us. I waited, and in the end he turned his head and said, "The park is beautiful today, Edward. This afternoon we must ride through it with Elizabeth, before the weather gets warmer. The trees are so stark, so black." "Yes, sir," I said, glancing at the woods to our right. When he bought the house, the first action he had taken was to have all the evergreen trees felled, and the remainder sprayed so that their greenery would be inhibited. With the passage of years they had regained their growth, and now the master would spend the summer months inside the house, the windows shuttered and the curtains drawn. Only with the coming of autumn would he return to the open air, obsessively watching the orange and brown leaves dropping to the ground and swirling across the lawns. The lake appeared before us as we rounded the edge of the wood. The grounds dropped down to it in a shallow and undulating incline from the house, which was above us and to our left. 100 yards from the water's edge I turned my head and looked towards the house, and saw the tall figure of Elizabeth moving down towards us, her long maroon dress sweeping across the grass. Knowing he would not see her, I said nothing to Todd. We stopped at the edge of the lake. In the night a crust of ice had formed on its surface. "The swans, Edward. Where are they?" He moved his head to the right, and placed his lips on one of the switches there. At once, the batteries built into the base of the carriage turned the motors of the servos, and the backrest slid upwards, bringing him into a position that was almost upright. He moved his head from side to side, a frown creasing his eyebrowless face. "Go and find their nests, Lasken. I must see them today." "It's the ice, sir," I said. "It has probably driven them from the water." I heard the rustle of silk on frosted grass, and turned. Elizabeth stood a few yards behind us, holding an envelope in her hands. She held it up, and looked at me with her eyebrows raised. I nodded silently. "That is the one." She smiled at me quickly. The master would not yet know that she was there. The outer membrane of his ears had been removed, rendering his hearing unfocused and undirectional. She swept past me in the peremptory manner she knew he approved of, and stood before him. He appeared unsurprised to see her. "There's a letter, Todd," she said. "Later," he said without looking at it. "Lasken can deal with it. I have no time now. It's from Gaston, I think. It looks like his stationery. Read it to me." He swung his head backward sharply. It was his instruction to me, "Move out of earshot." Obediently, I stepped away to a place where I knew he could not see me or hear me. Elizabeth bent down and kissed him on his lips. "Todd, whatever it is, please don't do it." "Read it to me," he said again. She slitted the envelope with her thumb and pulled out a sheet of thin white paper, folded in 3. I knew what the letter contained. Gaston had read it to me over the telephone the day before. He and I had arranged the details, and we knew that no higher price could be obtained, even for Todd. There had been difficulties with the television concessions, and for a while it had looked as if the French government was going to intervene. Gaston's letter was a short one. It said that Todd's popularity had never been higher, and that the Theatre Alhambra and its consortium had offered 8 million francs for another appearance. I listened to Elizabeth's voice as she read, marveling at the emotionless monotone of her articulation. She had warned me earlier that she did not think she was going to be able to read the letter to him. When she'd finished, Todd asked her to read it again. She did this, then placed the open letter in front of him, brushed her lips against his face, and walked away from him. As she passed me, she laid a hand on my arm for a moment, then continued on up towards the house. I watched her for a few seconds, seeing her slim beauty accentuated by the sunlight that fell sideways across her face, and strands of her hair blown behind by the wind. The master waved his head from side to side. "Loskind. Loskind." I went back to him. "Do you see this?" I picked it up and glanced at it. "I shall write to him, of course," I said. "It is out of the question." "No, no, I must consider. We must always consider. I have so much at stake." I kept my expression steady. "But it is impossible. You can give no more performances." "There is a way, Edward," he said, in as gentle a voice as I had ever heard him use. "I must find that way." I caught sight of a waterfowl a few yards from us, in the reeds at the edge of the lake. It waddled out onto the ice, confused by the frozen surface. I took one of the long poles from the side of the carriage and broke a section of the ice. The bird slithered across the ice and flew away, terrified by the noise. I walked back to Todd. "There. If there is some open water, the swans will return." The expression on his face was agitated. "The Theatre Alhambra," he said. "What shall we do?" "I will speak to your solicitor. It is an outrage that the theater should approach you. They know that you cannot go back. But 8 million francs. The money does not matter. You said that yourself once. No, it is not the money. Nor the public. It is everything." We waited by the lake for the swans, as the sun rose higher in the sky. I was exhilarated by the pale colors of the park, by the quiet and the calm. It was an aesthetic, sterile reaction, for the house and its grounds had oppressed me from the start. Only the transient beauty of the morning, a frozen, fragile countenance, stirred something in me. The master had lapsed into silence, and had returned the backrest to the horizontal position he found most relaxing. Though his eyes were closed, I knew he would not be asleep. I walked away from him, out of his earshot, and strolled around the perimeter of the lake, always keeping a watch for movement on the carriage. I wondered if he would be able to resist the offer from the Theatre Alhambra, fearing that if he did there would he no greater attraction. The time was right. He had not been seen in public for nearly 4.5 years. The mood of the public was right, for the media had recently returned their interest to him, criticizing his many imitators and demanding his return. None of this was lost on the master. There was only one Todd Alborn, and only he could have gone so far. No one could compete with him. Everything was right, and only the participation of the master was needed to complete it. The electric klaxon I had fitted to the carriage sounded. Looking back at him across the ice, I saw that he had moved his face to the switch. I turned back, and went to him. "I want to see Elizabeth," he said. "You know what she will say." "Yes. But I must speak to her." I turned the carriage round, and began the long and difficult return up the slope to the house. As we left the side of the lake, I saw white birds flying low in the distance, headed away from the house. I hoped that Todd had not seen them. He looked from side to side as we moved past the wood. I saw on the branches the new buds that would burst in the next few weeks. I think he saw only the bare black twigs, the stark geometry of the naked trees. In the house, I took him to his study, and lifted his body from the carriage he used for outside expeditions to the motorized one in which he moved about the house. He spent the rest of the day with Elizabeth, and I saw her only when she came down to collect for him the meals I prepared. In those moments we had time only to exchange glances, to intertwine fingers, to kiss lightly. She would say nothing of what he was thinking. He retired early, and Elizabeth with him, going to the room next to his, sleeping alone as she had done for 5 years. When she was sure he was asleep, she left her bed and came to mine. We made love at once. Afterwards we lay together in the dark, our hands clasped possessively. Only then would she tell me what she thought his decision would be. "He's going to do it," she said. I haven't seen him as excited as this for years. I have known Todd Alborn since we were both 18. Our families had known one another, and chance brought us together one year during a European holiday. Though we did not become close friends immediately, I found his company fascinating, and on our return to England we stayed in touch with each other. The fascination he held over me was not one I admired, but neither could I resist it. He possessed a fanatical and passionate dedication to what he was doing, and once started he would be deterred by nothing. He conducted several disastrous love affairs, and twice lost most of his money in unsuccessful business ventures. But he had a general aimlessness that disturbed me. I felt that once pressed into a direction he could control, he would be able to exploit his unusual talents. It was his sudden and unexpected fame that separated us. No one had anticipated it, least of all Todd. Yet when he recognized its potential, he embraced it readily. I was not with him when it began, though I saw him soon after. He told me what happened, and though it differs from the popular anecdote, I believe it. He was drinking with some friends when an accident with a knife occurred. One of his companions had been cut badly, and had fainted. During the commotion that followed, a stranger made a wager with Todd that he would not voluntarily inflict a wound on his own body. Todd slashed the skin of his forearm, and collected his money. The stranger offered to double the stake if Todd would amputate a finger. Placing his left hand on the table in front of him, Todd removed his index finger. A few minutes later, with no further encouragement from the stranger, who by this time had left, Todd cut off another finger. The following day a television company had picked up the story, and Todd was invited to the studio to relate what had happened. During the live transmission, and against the wishes of the interviewer, Todd repeated the operation. It was the reaction to this first broadcast, a wave of prurient shock from the public, and an hysterical condemnation in the media, that revealed to Todd the potential in such a display of self-mutilation. Finding a promoter, he commenced a tour of Europe, performing his act to paying audiences only. It was at this point, seeing his arrangements for publicity, and learning of the sums of money he was confident of earning, that I made the effort of dissociating myself from him. Purposely, I isolated myself from news of his exploits and would take no interest in the various public stunts he performed. It was the element of ritual in what he did that sickened me, and his native flair for showmanship only made him the more offensive to me. It was a year after this alienation that we met again. It was he who sought me out, and though I resisted him at first, I was unable to maintain the distance I desired. I learned that in the intervening period he had married. At first I was repelled by Elizabeth, for I thought that she loved Todd for his obsession, in the way the blood-hungry public loved him. But as I grew to know her better, I realized that she saw herself in some messianic role. It was then that I understood her to be as vulnerable as Todd, though in an entirely different way, and I found myself agreeing to work for Todd and to do for him whatever he requested. At first I refused to assist him with the mutilations, but later did as he asked. My change of mind in this instance was initiated by Elizabeth. The condition of his body when I started to work for him was so bad that he was almost entirely crippled. Though at first he had had several organs grafted back onto his body after mutilation, such operations could be carried out only a limited number of times, and while healing, prevented further performances. His left arm below the elbow had been removed, his left leg was almost intact beyond the 2 removed toes. His right leg was intact. One of his ears had been removed, and he had been scalped. All fingers but the thumb and index on his right hand had been removed. As a result of these injuries, he was incapable of administering the amputations himself, and in addition to the various assistants he employed for his act, he required me to operate the mutilating apparatus during the actual performances. He attested a disclaimer form for the injuries to which I was to be an accessory, and his career continued. And it went on, between spells for recovery, for another 2 years. In spite of the apparent contempt he had for his body, Todd bought the most expensive medical supervision he could find, and the recovery from each amputation was strictly observed before another performance. But the human body is finite, and his eventual retirement was inevitable. At his final performance, his genital organs were removed amid the greatest storm of publicity and outrage he had known. Afterwards, he made no further public appearance, and spent a long spell of convalescence in a private nursing home. Elizabeth and I stayed with him, and when he bought Racine House 50 miles from Paris, we went there with him. And from that day we had played out the mask, each pretending to the others that his career had reached its climax, each knowing that inside the limbless, earless, hairless, castrated man there was a flame burning still for its final extinguishment. And outside the gates of Racine House, Todd's private world waited for him. And he knew they waited, and Elizabeth and I knew they waited. Meanwhile our life went on, and he was the master. There was an interval of 3 weeks between my confirming to Gaston that Todd was to make another appearance and the actual night itself. There was much to be done. While we left the publicity arrangements to Gaston, Todd and I began the job of designing and building the equipment for the show. This was a process that in the past had been one of extreme distaste to me. It wrought an unpleasant tension between Elizabeth and myself, for she would not allow me to tell her about the equipment. This time, though, there was no such strain between us. Halfway through the work she asked me about the apparatus I was building, and that night, after Todd had fallen asleep, I took her down to the workshop. For 10 minutes she walked from one instrument to another, testing the smoothness of the mechanism and the sharpness of the blades. Finally, she looked at me without expression, then nodded. I contacted Todd's former assistants, and confirmed with them that they would be present at the performance. Once or twice I telephoned Gaston, and learned of the wave of speculation that was anticipating Todd's return. As for the master himself, he was taken with a burst of energy and excitement that stretched to its limits the prosthetic machinery which surrounded him. He seemed unable to sleep, and several nights would call for Elizabeth. For this period she did not come to my room, though I often visited her for an hour or two. One night Todd called her while I was there, and I lay in bed listening to him talk to her, his voice unnaturally high-pitched, though never uncontrolled or overexcited. When the day of the performance arrived, I asked him if he wanted to drive to the Alhambra in our specially built car, or to use the carriage and horses that I knew he preferred for public appearances. He chose the latter. We departed early, knowing that in addition to the distance we had to cover there would be several delays caused by admirers. We placed Todd at the front of the carriage, next to the driver, sitting him up in the seat I had built for him. Elizabeth and I sat behind, her hand resting lightly on my leg. Every so often, Todd would half turn his head and speak to us. On these occasions, either she or I would lean forward to acknowledge him and reply. Once we were on the main road into Paris, we encountered many large groups of admirers. Some cheered or called, some stood in silence. Todd acknowledged them all, but when one woman tried to scramble up into the carriage, he became agitated and nervous and screamed at me to get her away from him. The only place where he came into close contact with any of his admirers was during our stop to change horses. Then he spoke volubly and amiably, though afterwards he was noticeably tired. Our arrival at the Theatre Alhambra had been planned in great detail, and the police had cordoned off the crowd. There was a broad channel left free through which Todd could be wheeled. As the carriage halted, the crowd began to cheer, and the horses became nervous. I wheeled Todd in through the stage door, responding in spite of myself to the hysteria of the crowds. Elizabeth was close behind us. Todd took the reception well and professionally, smiling round from side to side, unable to acknowledge the acclaim in any other way. He appeared not to notice the small but determined and vociferous section of the crowd chanting the slogans that they bore on placards. Once inside his dressing room, we were able to relax for a while. The show was not scheduled to start for another 2.5 hours. After a short nap, Todd was bathed by Elizabeth, and then dressed in his stage costume. 20 minutes before he was due to give his performance, one of the female staff of the theater came into the dressing room and presented him with a bouquet of flowers. Elizabeth took them from the woman and laid them uncertainly before him, knowing well his dislike of flowers. "Thank you," he said to the woman. "Flowers. What beautiful colors." Gaston came in 15 minutes later, accompanied by the manager of the Alhambra. Both men shook hands with me. Gaston kissed Elizabeth on her cheek, and the manager tried to strike up a conversation with Todd. Todd did not reply, and a little later I noticed that the manager was weeping silently. Todd stared at us all. It had been decided by Todd that there was to be no special ceremony surrounding this performance. There were to be no speeches, no public remarks from Todd. No interviews to be granted. The act on the stage would follow carefully the instructions he had dictated to me, and the rehearsals that the other assistants had been following for the last week. He turned to Elizabeth, and put his face up towards her. She kissed him tenderly, and I turned away. After nearly a minute he said, "All right, Lasken. I'm ready." I took the handle of his carriage and wheeled him out of the dressing room and down the corridor towards the wings of the stage. We heard a man's voice talking in French of Todd, and a great roar of applause from the audience. The muscles of my stomach contracted. The expression on Todd's face did not change. 2 assistants came forward and lifted Todd into his harness. This was connected by 2 thin wires to a pulley in the flies, and when operated by one of the assistants in the wings would move Todd around the stage. When he was secure, his 4 false limbs were strapped in place. He nodded to me, and I prepared myself. For a second, I saw the expression in Elizabeth's eyes. Todd was not looking in our direction, but I made no response to her. I stepped onto the stage. A woman screamed, then the whole audience rose to its feet. My heart raced. The equipment was already on the stage, covered with heavy velvet curtains. I walked to the center of the stage, and bowed to the audience. Then I walked from one piece of apparatus to another, removing the curtains. As each piece was revealed, the audience roared its approval. The voice of the manager crackled over the PA system, imploring them to return to their seats. As I had done at previous performances, I stood still until the audience was seated once more. Each movement was provocative. I finished revealing the equipment. To my eye it was ugly and utilitarian, but the audience relished the appearance of the razor-sharp blades. I walked to the footlights. Mesdames, Messieurs. Silence fell abruptly. Le Maître. I moved downstage, holding out my hand in the direction of Todd. I tried purposely to disregard the audience. I could see Todd in the wings, hanging in his harness beside Elizabeth. He was not talking to her or looking at her. His head was bent forward, and he was concentrating on the sound from the audience. They were still in silence, the anticipatory motionlessness of the voyeur. Seconds passed, and still Todd waited. Somewhere in the audience a voice spoke quietly. Abruptly, the audience roared. It was Todd's moment. He nodded to the assistant, who wound the pulley ropes and propelled Todd out onto the stage. The movement was eerie and unnatural. He floated on the wire so that his false legs just scraped the canvas of the stage. His false arms hung limply at his side. Only his head was alert, greeting and acknowledging the audience. I had expected them to applaud, but at his appearance they subsided again into silence. I had forgotten about that in the intervening years. It was the silences that had always appalled me. The pulley assistant propelled Todd to a couch standing to the right of the stage. I helped him lie down on it. Another assistant, who was a qualified medical doctor, came onto the stage and carried out a brief examination. He wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Then he went to the front of the stage and made his statement to the audience. I have examined the master. He is fit. He is sane. He is in full possession of his senses, and knows what he is about to undertake. I have signed a statement to this effect. The pulley assistant raised Todd once more, and propelled him around the stage, from one piece of equipment to another. When he had inspected them all, he nodded his agreement. At the front of the stage, in the center, I unstrapped his false legs. As they fell away from his body, 1 or 2 men in the audience gasped. Todd's arms were removed. I then pulled forward one of the pieces of equipment, a long, white-covered table with a large mirror above it. I swung Todd's torso onto the table, then removed the harness and signaled for it to be lifted away. I positioned Todd so that he was lying with his head towards the audience, and with his whole body visible to them in the mirror. I was working amidst silence. I did not look towards the audience. I did not look towards the wings. I was perspiring. Todd said nothing to me. When Todd was in the position he required, he nodded to me and I turned towards the audience, bowing and indicating that the performance was about to commence. There was a ripple of applause, soon finished. I stood back and watched Todd without reaction. He was feeling the audience again. In a performance consisting of one solitary action, and a mute one at that, for best effect his timing had to be accurate. There was only one piece of apparatus on the stage which was to be used this evening. The others were there for the effect of their presence. Todd and I both knew which one it was to be. I would wheel it over at the appropriate time. The audience was silent again, but restless. I felt that it was poised critically. One movement would explode it into reaction. Todd nodded to me. I walked again from one piece of apparatus to the next. On each one I put my hand to the blade, as if feeling its sharpness. By the time I had been to each one, the audience was ready. I could feel it, and I knew Todd could. I went back to the apparatus Todd had selected, a guillotine made from tubular aluminium and with a blade of finest stainless steel. I trundled it over to his table, and connected it with the brackets for that purpose. I tested its solidity, and made a visual check that the release mechanism would work properly. Todd was positioned now so that his head overhung the edge of the table, and was directly underneath the blade. The guillotine was so constructed that it did not obscure the view of his body in the mirror. I removed his costume. He was naked. The audience gasped when they saw his scars, but returned to silence. I took the wire loop of the release mechanism and, as Todd had instructed me, tied it tightly around the thick meat of his tongue. To take up the slack of the wire, I adjusted it at the side of the apparatus. I leaned over him and asked if he was ready. He nodded. "Edward," he said indistinctly. "Come closer." I leaned forward so that my face was near his. To do this I had to pass my own neck under the guillotine blade. The audience approved of this action. "What is it?" I said. "I know, Edward. About you and Elizabeth." I looked into the wings, where she was still standing. I said, "And you still want to?" He nodded again, this time more violently. The wire release on his tongue tightened and the mechanism clicked open. He nearly caught me in the apparatus. I jumped away as the blade plummeted down. I turned from him, looking desperately into the wings at Elizabeth as the first screams from the audience filled the theater. Elizabeth stepped out onto the stage. She was looking at Todd. I went to her. Todd's torso lay on the table. His heart was still beating, for blood spurted rhythmically in thick gouts from his severed neck. His hairless head swung from the apparatus. Where the wire gripped his tongue, it had wrenched it nearly from his throat. His eyes were still open. We turned and faced the audience. The change that had come over them was total. In under 5 seconds they had panicked. A few people had fainted, the rest were standing. The noise of their shouting was unbelievable. They moved towards the doors. None looked at the stage. One man swung his fist at another, was knocked down from behind. A woman was having hysterics, tearing at her clothes. No one paid her any attention. I heard a shot, and ducked instinctively, pulling Elizabeth down with me. Women screamed, men shouted. I heard the PA click on, but no voice came through. Abruptly, the doors of the auditorium swung open simultaneously on all sides, and armed riot police burst in. It had been planned carefully. As the police attacked them, the crowd fought back. I heard another shot, then several more in rapid succession. I took Elizabeth by the hand, and led her from the stage. In the dressing room, we watched through a window as the police attacked the crowds in the street. Many people were shot. Tear gas was released, a helicopter hovered overhead. We stood together in silence, Elizabeth crying. We were obliged to stay within the safety of the theater building for another 12 hours. The next day we returned to Racine House, and the first leaves were spreading. The end.